It seems fitting that today we should discuss a story of a queen whose corpse was left to decay and then gawked at by tourists. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to look at the disturbing tale of Catherine of Valois, whose corpse lay in state for over 300 years. If you enjoy tales of the strange and macabre from history, stay tuned. Catherine was born in 1401 in the French city of Tudor. She was the daughter of Charles VI of France and Isabella of Bavaria, a politically expedient marriage that aimed to improve relations between France and Bavaria. From the perspective of history, it succeeded. In 1415, when Catherine was just 14, she married the 17-year-old King Henry V of England. This was another politically expedient marriage, but one that succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. See, the marriage united the crowns of England and France, at least in theory, since Henry never actually conquered all of France, and Catherine never accepted the title Queen of France. But that's neither here nor there. When Catherine arrived in England, she stayed in what is now known as the Queen's House in Greenwich, and converted to Protestantism, possibly under duress. Soon after, she gave birth to a son, the future Henry VI, making Catherine the Queen of England, and Queen Mother of England and Duchess of Normandy, all before the age of 20. Catherine adored her husband, so much so that she was devastated by his death in 1422. Following his death, Catherine acted as regent for her 9-month-old son, while the country looked for a new monarch. Eventually, the English nobles chose Henry's uncle, Richard, Duke of York, to be king instead. As a result, Catherine and her son fled to Normandy, where Richard's army hunted them down and forced them back to England. There they were confined to different areas of Windsor Castle, essentially under house arrest. While living in Windsor Castle, Catherine had a secret. She married Owen Tudor, a handsome Welsh nobleman in attendance at the royal court. The marriage was kept secret, but soon 2 more children were born, a boy named Edmund and a girl named Margaret, who would later become Queen of Scotland, and still no one knew of Catherine's secret marriage. Then in 1427, King Richard died. His successor, Queen Isabella of Castile, aunt of Catherine, confiscated her properties and sentenced her to life in the Tower of London. Once again though, Catherine's 2 youngest children saved her, as her son Henry begged his aunt to go easy on their mother. With her reputation ruined, Catherine spent the remainder of her life cloistered in various religious houses across England. She died on January 3, 1437, at the age of 35. It's interesting that Catherine had such a pivotal role in shaping English history. Without her secret marriage to Owen Tudor, the Tudor dynasty wouldn't exist and England would look vastly different today. Yet there are few records of her life and almost no records of her death. That's because the Tudors didn't come to power until decades after her death. For most of English history, the royal line started with Henry VII, who was Catherine's son, not her secret marriage. So let us talk about what little record there is of her death, and the shocking way that she was treated afterwards. Her will was written on December 29, 1436, and she left most of her property to her daughter Margaret. Everything else was divided between her sons Edmund and Henry. After her death, her body was embalmed according to the fashion of the time. The innards were removed and likely boiled in wine, then preserved in a mixture of spices and herbs. These were then buried in a separate ceremony on January in the choir of Canterbury Cathedral. Meanwhile, the rest of her body was washed, dressed in fine clothes, and placed in a coffin. On January she was taken to Charing Cross, where a large crowd gathered. The coffin was placed in a hearse and drawn to Westminster Abbey, where it was received by a group of nobles, including her son Henry. The funeral procession wound its way through the streets of London to the Abbey, following a route that is still used for coronations today. On the way, the coffin was taken into St. Margaret's Church, where it lay in state for 2 days before being moved to Westminster Abbey. On January, Catherine was buried in a tomb beside her first husband, Henry V, in the choir of Westminster Abbey. Both were venerated as saints in the 15th century, and their bodies were enshrined together in a single monument. It was designed by William Coke, the same architect who designed Henry's tomb, and completed by 1441. While historians know about Catherine's burial thanks to extensive records, they know very little about the condition of her body when it was entombed. We do know that she had suffered from tuberculosis for several years, and that she was quite thin when she died. Whether her body was placed in the tomb intact, or only partial remains were placed in the tomb, is unknown. What we do know is that in 1461, Henry VIII came to power, and he demolished the chapel containing her tomb, to make room for a new chapel. Most of the effigies were destroyed, but her stone effigy was spared. Then in 1536, during the reign of Henry VIII, Westminster Abbey underwent major renovations. According to some accounts, Catherine's remains were disinterred, but when and where they were moved to is not known. In the mid-17th century, the floor of the abbey was excavated to repair damage caused by flooding, and in doing so, the bones of several people were found, including those of Henry V and Catherine of Valois. They were placed in a simple wooden chest and left beneath the abbey floor. The area was then covered over and built upon. The chest remained undisturbed until 1774, when it was discovered by a stonemason named John the Press, caught wind of the discovery, and soon hundreds of visitors a day were paying admission to see the corpse, which was described as mummified and partially naked. The experience was considered educational and moral improving. It was said that touching the glass case containing the remains cured toothaches and cured eye problems. It was even reported that women came to the box to see if they could find a husband, as Catherine had once been young and beautiful. By the 18th century, people were no longer satisfied with simply viewing the remains from afar. Students and young intellectuals would sneak into the abbey at night to remove bones and examine them. Others would steal small portions of bone to grind up and drink as a medicine. Still others would kiss the remains, believing it granted them good luck. By the end of the century, the remains had been reduced to a shapeless mass. Finally, in 1878, the remains of Catherine and Henry V were discovered by workers excavating the foundations for the new Public Records Office, now known as the National Archives. The bones were reinterred in a new tomb in the nave of Westminster Abbey with full royal honors. The funeral procession retraced the steps that her original funeral had taken more than 450 years earlier, and at the gravesite, the Dean of Westminster read a psalm and a collect was made for the repose of her soul. Finally, after 500 years, Catherine of Valois was laid to rest. If you like stories like this, be sure to check out my series on the mysterious and macabre history of the British royals. Also, please consider supporting me. Until next time, remember John, and don't forget to keep an eye out for those pesky Romans. They're up to no good.